runs along part of the trackbed of the world's oldest railway, founded by Act of Parliament, in 1758. And later in the program, we shall be looking at some of the small but unusual locomotives that work on the line.
But first, we go back to 1991, when the Ukraine was still part of the Soviet Union and when steam rail tours out there were something of a rarity.
In the summer of 1991, the Soviet Union was in great turmoil. Glasnost and Perestroika were radically altering the Soviet outlook, and events were happening that would have been unthinkable just a short time before. One such example was the introduction of a series of steam-hauled rail tours for the benefit of foreign tourists and enthusiasts, set up in conjunction with the Soviet business venture and British rail tour operators. This was one of the first to be organized and featured 3 steam locomotives. The E-Class 010, one example of many hundreds built. The elegant SU Class 262 in green livery, common to all Soviet Express passenger locomotives, and the L Class 210 with its distinctive high-set boiler. The tour started from Kiev, with steam haulage commencing from Fastov. Frequent stops were made on the single-line section to allow trains to pass, this one being a Moscow-Kiev Express. The next stop was Gytomyr, a fairly large town with its own tramway system, and in the depot some unusual vehicles were to be found. Several large locomotive depots were visited on the way, all with some dumped steam engines. Everywhere there was constant freight and passenger movement, emphasizing the importance that this country places on rail transport. The Ukraine is predominantly flat. However, there are a few hilly sections. The L-class loco certainly proving its worth on this occasion. Not to be outdone, the E-Class 010 put in some good performances towards the end of the tour. At last, an example of working steam was found, although at the time of this visit, there were several sites containing many stored locos as part of a strategic reserve program. At the end of the tour, some time was spent in Kiev with a chance to see some of its fine architecture. Also to be found in a local park was a narrow gauge railway, together with a steam loco, sadly no longer in use. Rail tours in this area are now fairly common and becoming even more ambitious in their nature, offering more steam locos, greater variety of routes, and visits to industrial steam sites. However, this tour remains something of a landmark, being one of the first of its kind and also one of the last to be held in the Soviet Union. Over now to mainline BR for our regular look at some recent steam specials.
April the 13th, 1993 was a special day in the mainline steam calendar. As well as being the day of the only North Wales Coast Express working, it also saw the bringing together of 3 Stania Pacifics, number 6201 Princess Elizabeth, working the Crewe to Llandudno section, 46229 Duchess of Hamilton taking over for the run to Holyhead and back, and finally 46203 Princess Margaret Rose for the final leg from Llandudno to Crewe. The trio were originally scheduled to work a series of shuttles between Nottingham and Sheffield on the 25th of April. The whole operation would have required no less than 27 BR staff passed for steam working. So it was decided to adopt a more modest approach in the form of the one North Wales coast working. Before the main train was due, Duchess of Hamilton and Princess Margaret Rose made their way to Llandudno in readiness for the second and third legs. In 1992, dwindling passenger services led to the curtailment of steam services on this route. There was, however, no shortage of interest in this event, with photographers and enthusiasts invading the station and surrounding areas at Llandudno to view the 3 locomotives together. Without doubt, one of the most spectacular man-made backdrops to a railway in this country is Conway Castle, subject of many famous photographs in steam days. As there are no turning facilities at Llandudno, Princess Margaret Rose had to follow the main train all the way to Valley, near Holyhead, to be turned on the triangle there. This having been done, she then preceded Duchess of Hamilton back through Anglesey, which, by contrast with Llandudno, was relatively devoid of crowds. Princess Margaret Rose then duly completed the third leg back to Crewe, marking the end of a unique event, the like of which had never been seen before.
The Middleton Railway is justifiably proud of its historical background. Not only is it the world's oldest railway, but it was the first to use commercially successful steam locomotives. Its claim to fame as the world's oldest railway comes from an Act of Parliament passed in 1758, allowing Brandley to build a wagonway for the purpose of transporting coal from the mines at Middleton to the developing town of Leeds. The first commercially successful steam locomotives were designed by John Blenkinsop and built by Matthew Murray in 1812 as an alternative means of transport for the line, due to the severe shortage of horses, a result of the Napoleonic Wars. They also marked the beginning of locomotive building in Leeds, which has continued to this day, and the Hunslet Engine Company is still in the business of constructing railway vehicles. Right from the start of preservation in 1960, a sense of history has been maintained at the Middleton, as Chairman Ian Smith explains.
Middleton Railway started off with one diesel loco, very historic one at that though. It was the first diesel actually made by the Hunslet Engine Company in Leeds, built in 1932 and worked for the London, Midland and Scottish Railway.
With the dummy chimney still making it look like a steam engine?
No, that one wasn't. 7401, which is at the end of this line, doesn't have a dummy chimney. The chap who designed it thought that that would make it look too much like a steam engine. Now his rivals across the road were Hudswell Clark. They decided to put a dummy chimney on. The engine which is running the passenger services today, the diesel, they decided that they would put a chimney on it, and also the throttle looks just like a steam engine throttle, because they thought that it would be better to educate people to drive diesels if you did that. So it was again two different design schools in the same year, because both 7401 and Mary were built the same year.
Now you've got some very unusual rolling stock too.
We have indeed. The image that the Middleton Railway is sort of trying to recreate in industrial year is that of what we call an industrial paddy train. Many collieries and big firms had what we call paddy trains. Now they were fairly clapped out coaches. They didn't have seats in them. They had little wooden boxes for people to sit on. Now we're not quite that bad here. We've put seats in ours, but we've converted two mail vans into carriages, and they're more than adequate for the length of run we've got, which is 1.25 miles. In fact, people quite like them because one of them has got an American-style balcony on the back, and you can stand outside there and you can almost touch the steam engine as it's pulling you along, and people love that.
One of the more unusual steam engines to be found on a preserved railway is the vertical boilered Sentinel shunting locomotive. Built in 1933, this is a single-speed engine, although some were fitted with a gearbox providing 2 speeds, slow and not quite so slow. It's an appropriate locomotive for the 10-mile-per-hour restriction necessary on this line, and makes an interesting sight as it passes under the M1 motorway. Many people come to sample this delightful line, and also to learn about the true beginnings of railways and of the steam locomotives that worked here 17 years before Stephenson's rocket took its place in history.
The Sacramento Rail Fair, held in May 1991, was organized to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the Californian State Railroad Museum and attracted visitors from all over the world, including a couple of steam locomotives from Great Britain. Locomotives of all ages were represented, one of the older ones being the Bear Harbor Lumber Company No. 1, built in San Francisco in 1892. It was, however, the big locos that attracted most attention, and they don't come much bigger than Challenger number 3985. Not far behind, though, is Union Pacific 484 number 844, weighing in at around 405 tons. Built in 1944 for fast freight and passenger work, it was preserved upon withdrawal and is now based at Cheyenne. Back to the Challenger, a 4664 Mallet. At a weight of 478 tons, it's the world's largest operational steam locomotive. Withdrawn in 1949 after only 16 years' service, it was stored as a static exhibit until 1981, when it was restored to working order and converted to oil burning in 1990. Diesel power was also represented, including the famous Centennial. The two British locos shipped over for this event were the replica Locomotion and Ibert, class J52 number 1247. Another replica was Tom Thumb, the 1829 original being the first to pull passengers in North America. The sun doesn't always shine in California, and to prove the point, heavy rain was the order of the day as Challenger and 844 returned to their base on a special working. The mighty Feather River Canyon was an ideal setting in which to see the special. Indeed, equally impressive was one of the gigantic freights under 8-headed diesel power, which are a regular feature here. However, rain and low cloud cover made further photography virtually impossible, and in the event only one shot was obtained near the end of the day, and in almost dark conditions. It was well worth the wait, though. The sight and sound of close on 1,000 tons of steam locomotive and 22 coaches forging its way up the valley was an experience not to be missed. The second day of the return working was made through the Nevada desert in much improved weather conditions, and the special is seen here just after emerging out of the Reno Junction. The fine sight of these impressive locos working through the desert was a fitting end to a memorable event and a testimony to the depth and quality of the preservation movement in the USA.
That's all from Making Tracks this week. In the next program, working steam will be featured, and we'll start by going to the former East Germany to see some of the narrow gauge lines still in existence.
We'll also be visiting the fascinating and colourful country of Ecuador to see one of the world's great lines, still steam operated by an ageing fleet of Baldwin locomotives.
The program will be coming from the North Yorkshire Moors Railway, one of the longest and most scenic preserved lines in the country. And we'll also have our regular feature on mainline steam. So until next week, goodbye.
Goodbye.
And in fact, you can see that programme tomorrow afternoon at the usual time, 1:45.